this is all important sociological data, and it does support the hypothesis that Southern culture is related to increased acceptability of violence in general. Ultimately, though, Nisbet knows he needs to go for the gold experimental data. He decides to investigate the effect of actually insulting Southerners and Northerners in the lab. This is no small feat and involved determining how to deliver insults to participants from the South and the North who he does expect might actually get insulted without getting them really pissed off. In the study, participants from around the US at a university took part in the experimental insult condition or the control condition, no insult. The insult condition required 3 Confederates, which is quite an operation in a typical social psychology lab. One person was placed at a filing cabinet and one at each end of that hallway where the cabinet was. As part of the study procedures, the participant had to make his way up and down the hallway, which meant passing the Confederate at the filing cabinet twice. This forced the Confederate at the cabinet to have to stop what he's doing, close the cabinet, and let him by twice. The second time, he mutters, "asshole," and bumps the participant. The Confederates make careful observations from the ends of the hallway of the participant's reaction. Now is a good time to stop and think. If you were the participant, what would you do if this guy bumped you and muttered "asshole" when you were just trying to take a psychology study? Would you find it amusing, or would you be angry? Nisbet didn't just want to ask participants whether they were amused or angry, so he used a variety of more covert measures, and this reduces the chance for experimenter demand. So in the study, the participant went along to what they thought was the entire study, where they filled out a battery of dependent measures. These measures were aimed at getting at participants' attitudes about violence and their feelings of aggression. They used a word fragment completion task, which involves filling in missing letters to make words. For example, participants can fill in the blank for IGHT, for example, with an F or an L, spelling fight or light. They used an identification of emotions task where participants viewed photographs of people making facial expressions, and they were asked, how angry does this person appear? By testing many emotions, this lets them determine if some subjects were perceiving more negative emotion in the photos than others, and therefore were potentially feeling more negative emotion following being insulted. They also used a scenario completion task. And in this task, participants read a story about a man who gets provoked into a fight by another man at a party. And participants are asked to fill in the ending. And here they were interested in whether participants would actually fill in the ending of the story with violence or not. Results indicated that some of the results of the behavioral study were null. Being insulted and being Southern was unrelated to performance in that word fragment completion task and the photo emotion identification task. There was a significant difference in how Southerners and Northerners were observed to react to that insult in the hallway. 65% of Northerners expressed amusement, whereas 15% of Southerners did. In addition, insulted Southerners were significantly more likely than not insulted Southerners to complete the story about the man being provoked at the party with descriptions of violence, a fight breaking out. So being a Southerner mattered in this experiment, both to how participants experienced the insult compared to Northerners and what happened when they were insulted. They were more likely to imagine and describe violence as a result of provocation. This suggests that Southerners might not have been more aggressive than Northerners at baseline, but when insulted, they were more likely to take the insult seriously and write about violence as an acceptable response to insult. Later on, Nisbet and Cohen followed up on these results with an even more covert methodology to measure aggression. They used the same behavioral design with the file cabinet and insult and bumping, but added a pre- and post-bump measure of cortisol and testosterone. Briefly, as you may have encountered in a few other psychology and biology courses, cortisol measurement can be taken as an index of physiological stress. Testosterone changes can be interpreted as a measure of preparedness for aggression. Both of these can be measured with saliva samples. So the participants were given small receptacles to spit into for the samples, pre and post getting bumped. The results provided good evidence that there was a difference in the response of Southerners and Northerners to insult at the physiological level. The researchers observed regional background differences in cortisol and testosterone from insults. So as you can see in the graph on the left, cortisol levels rose 79% for insulted Southerners in red, compared to 42% for the control Southerners. So insult is having an impact on Southerners' cortisol. Compare this to Northerners in blue, where they saw no effect on cortisol from the insults. They observed a 33% increase for insulted Northerners versus a 39% increase for the control condition. Similarly, testosterone levels rose for insulted Southerners at a 12% increase compared to a 4% increase for control. So insult is also affecting testosterone levels for Southern participants. By contrast, a 4 to 6% increase was observed across both the insult and control condition for the Northerners, so it didn't have an effect on Northerners' testosterone. The effects of insults and Southernness on these physiological indicators of stress and aggression, they help bolster the argument that Southerners, as people from cultures of honor, really do have an increased propensity for violence and aggression, perhaps in a way that Northerners do not. To sum up, we asked, why is there more violence in the South than the North? A large body of research led by Nisbet suggests that this perception is backed by data. There are regional differences in attitudes about self-protection, such as criteria for killing or violence, socialization of children to violence and capital punishment, and the different approaches to violence can be observed at the individual level in response to insult. The evidence supports the possibility that a cultural level factor, a culture of honor, springing from historic economic pressures that reflect land use, might still be present and contributing to greater acceptance of violence as justified. Let's pause and think about this question. Over many years, Nisbet and his colleagues investigated whether violence is really more prevalent in the South and whether it's linked to the South being a culture of honor. Which of the following would most likely trigger aggression in a culture of honor based on this research? 1, a lack of social decorum. 2, dirtiness and squalor. 3, insulting behavior. 4, deliberately causing disorder.